In this video, we will be looking at how to solve absolute value equations. It's pretty much what our essential question will be. How do I solve absolute value equations? So there's a couple things we need to take care of before we can even begin actually solving the equation. So the first thing we'll want to do is isolate the absolute value. And what that means is I want to have the absolute value and everything on the inside of the absolute value kind of by itself on one side of the equal sign. Quick example would be something like if I had the absolute value of x plus 2 minus 3 equals 8. To isolate the absolute value, that means I want to get the absolute value by itself, so I'd add 3 to both sides, and I've had the absolute value of x plus 2 equals 11. Now this is the absolute value isolated. On number 2, there's 3 different parts. Let's put part A up here. Let's see like that. If absolute value equals a negative, no solution. Part B. If absolute value equals 0, one solution. And part C is the one we'll run into the most. If absolute value equals a positive, then rewrite the equation without absolute values twice. One equal to the positive, one equal to the negative. So part A was if the absolute value equals a negative, there's no solution. Part B is if the absolute value equals 0, there's one solution. In part C, if absolute value equals a positive, then we rewrite the equation without the absolute values twice. So we're going to write that equation down twice. One equal to the positive and one equal to the negative. Okay, so let's look at some examples. Kind of clear up what these words are saying. Example 1, I have the absolute value of x equals 4. So our absolute value is isolated, and it equals a positive. So I'm going to rewrite this equation twice without the absolute value signs. One time equal to the positive, and then one time equal to the negative. And we're done. So we get x equals 4, comma, negative 4. So let's look at number 2. So my absolute value is isolated. The absolute value is all by itself on the left, on one side of the equal sign, and we equal a positive. So if it equals a positive, we'll rewrite the equation twice. One equal to the positive version of 45, and the other equal to the negative version of 45. So we'll rewrite it twice. 5x plus 20 equals 45, and 5x plus 20 equals negative 45. Now we just solve both equations. Subtract 20, we get 5x equals 25, divided by 5, and x equals 5. That's one of them, so we have to do this twice. One's for the positive 45, and now we'll do it for the negative 45. So we'll subtract 20, we'll get 5x equals negative 65, divide both sides by 5, and we get x equals negative 13. So our solutions are x equals 5 and negative 13. So number 3, this is a situation where we actually have to isolate the absolute value before we can begin. So when I look on my left-hand side of my equal sign, I see the absolute value, the x plus 2, inside that absolute value sign, but then on the outside is the minus 8. So for this to be truly isolated, for this absolute value to be truly isolated, I need to get rid of this minus 8. So how am I going to do that? Well, I'll add 8 to both sides. Now I rewrite my absolute value. Absolute value of x plus 2 is equal to 0. Now we're ready to really begin this absolute value problem. My absolute value is isolated, and I have one of my scenarios. If the absolute value equals 0, there's going to be one solution. So what that means is I just need to set up one equation. There's no positive and negative 0, so we'll just set it equal to 0, drop our absolute value signs and set equal to 0, and this is the only equation I have to solve. So we'll subtract 2 from both sides. We get x equals negative 2, and then we're done with that problem. So at this point, what I'd like you to do is go ahead and pause, try numbers 1 through 6 in the guided 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7. Number 3 got mixed and skipped somehow. So 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Try those on your own right now, and then we'll come back and we'll look at them together. So pause right here, and then we'll look at these. So hopefully you took the time to pause and try these on your own. I'm going to go through these kind of quick since hopefully you already did these. So we have the absolute value. It's already isolated, so I can just set it whatever's on the inside of the absolute value, which is x already by itself, equal to the positive, and then I'll set what's on the inside of the absolute value equal to the negative. We already solved for x in both equations, so we get our solution is 12 comma negative 12. Number 2, I actually have to isolate the absolute value before I can move forward. So I have the absolute value of x plus 7 is equal to 8. Now my absolute value is isolated. So I can set the inside of the absolute value equal to the positive and the negative. And I solve both equations. Subtract 7, x equals 1. Subtract 7, and x equals negative 15. So we get x equals 1, negative 15. On this number 4, same thing. I have to isolate my absolute value first, so I'll subtract 3. And I'll get the absolute value of x plus 4 is equal to negative 3. I'm done with the problem at this point because remember, part A was if an absolute value equals a negative, we have no solution. So, no solution. Number 5, we have to isolate the absolute value first, so we'll subtract 4 from both sides. I'll have the absolute value of x plus 3 equals 0. I have my one solution in this scenario, so we can say that drop the absolute values, x plus 3 equals 0, subtract 3, and we get x equals negative 3. Number 6, same process, isolate the absolute value. Well, to do that, I'll have to subtract 8 from both sides. So when I look at, when I do that, I have 5 minus 8 is negative 3 is equal to the absolute value of x plus 2. Well, my absolute value is equal to a negative, so we know no solution. Last but not least, number 7, we have the absolute value of x minus 3.5 is equal to 0.003. So my absolute value is already isolated, so I can go ahead and move on to setting it equal to the positive and the negative. We'll add 3.5 to both sides. And on our left-hand equation, we have x is equal to 3.503. Then we'll go to the right-hand equation, adding 3.5. We're really subtracting these two numbers, so I'll get 3.497. X equals 3.497. And then that is our solution. So that is how we can solve absolute value equations. Remember, there's 3 main scenarios. Our scenarios are if absolute value equals a negative, no solution. If the absolute value equals 0, we have one solution. Drop the absolute value signs and set equal to 0. In part C, if the absolute value equals a positive, then rewrite the equation without absolute values twice. One equal to the positive, one equal to the negative. Thank you very much for watching this video, and have a great evening.